after that day in the dirt at Woodbury Junior High, I knew I wanted to change. I just didn't know how to change. Interestingly enough, I was in special ed classes in school. I had a third grade reading level, and I was in eighth grade. I had some issues, right? But fortunately for me, I had a caring teacher that discovered all I needed was some glasses, and that helped things a lot. I also had my mother who worked 2 and 3 jobs her whole life, and really I saw her work ethic, and I saw that there are benefits to hard work, so I just went to work. The other thing I did was I set some pretty high goals. I decided that I wanted to play pro football, and then I wanted to go to law school. Pro football because I just loved football, and law school because I wanted to be rich. I thought, hey, that's the way to do it. The interesting thing, though, I set those goals in place, and I was so passionate about them, it moved me to do things differently. It really did. Every day, every week, every month, I did things differently because I was so obsessed with those two things. And things started to change for me. As I got into 9th grade, I went from a DC student to a straight A student. I played football, basketball, and ran track. And as a freshman, played on the junior varsity freshman team, the junior varsity team, and the varsity football team. That year we went to state, and we won. And I actually got in the game. They handed me the ball, I got clobbered, and I thought it was awesome. But anyway, we went to state, and I started making a name for myself at the high school. And as things progressed, moving into my sophomore year, we started having a lot of family problems, a lot of tumultuous experiences at home. There was some bad things happen. My parents split, and my little brother and I were living with my mother and her boyfriend, who was a heroin addict. And as we were living in this environment, even though it was sort of crazy and there was a lot of tumultuous things happening, I was still trying to hold it together at school and doing really, really well. And I remember coming home one day, I was 15 years old. I remember coming home from school and my mother saying, I got to talk to you. And I said to her, well, what do you need to talk to me about? She goes, I'm done. I'm like, what do you mean you're done? She goes, I'm done with you. I'm like, what do you mean you're done with me? She goes, I got to split. You and your brother need to find a place to stay. And I said, no, you're not. You are not bailing on me. And she said, like hell I am. I'm totally bailing on you. You got to find a place to stay. I can't take it anymore. And I was completely devastated. I had no idea what to even do. My little brother was 13. I was 15. So I did the one thing I always did when I had really trying things happen to me. I got some sneakers on and I went running again. This time I went running in the desert. And I ran and I ran and I ran. It must have been for hours. I didn't know how long or how far or even where I was at. I ran to the point where I was utterly exhausted and collapsed once again in the dirt. Laying in the dirt, I lifted my head up to heaven and I said, what am I supposed to do? What is it I'm supposed to do? And a very strong impression came into my mind. It said, call Brent. I'm like, call Brent? Brent was a friend of mine at school. I'm like, call Brent. I'm like, okay. So I got up from the dirt, walked home, and I called my friend Brent. I said, Brent, Mom's kicking me out. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. Brent goes, that's okay, dude. Just come live with us. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, just come live with us. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I don't have a place to stay, and I don't know what to do. He said, yes, pack your crap and come live with us. And I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. So I had this little orange duffel bag that I got at football camp the year before. I packed everything I owned in that little orange duffel bag, and I moved in with Brent. Interesting thing, on the surface, it seems really tragic that I was kicked out. My mom, she left. My little brother went and lived with my stepsister, and she went and lived with the Hessians motorcycle gang on the outskirts of Las Vegas. There's 27 people in a 3-bedroom house, and she was sort of like their den mother. And it was crazy, but at the time, she was having a nervous breakdown, and that's all she could do. And those people loved and accepted her, and she moved in with them. At the time, I never thought that would be one of the best things that ever happened to me. But as I went and moved in with Brent's family, an interesting thing happened. In the evenings, they would gather together and partake of food. They called it dinner. I'm like, oh, what's this? You know, at dinner, there was a conversation. People would say, well, how was your day? Well, my day was fine. Well, how was yours? And they were like kind to one another. And they were like looking at one another and wanting to know how their day was. And for the first time in my life, I'm like, wait a minute. Maybe this is how a family's supposed to react. Maybe they're supposed to love each other enough to listen to them, to understand them, to care for them. And, you know, Brent's uncle, who we were staying with, you know, he knew I needed some money. He'd say, I want you to do a bunch of work in the backyard or on the roof. And he'd pay me money so I'd have date money. And they had this back room in their house that was just full of food. And I could go back there and eat whatever I wanted at any time. It was like a dream come true. And it was amazing to me that normal was quite different than I was used to. Getting kicked out at 15, quite possibly, was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I spent the remainder of my high school years sort of bouncing from friends' houses to school to work, doing my best to hide the fact that I really didn't have a home, and excelling in school and sports the best I could so that I could still fulfill my dream. And it was Brent's family that helped me do that helped me see that I could be someone better than who I was. And I'll forever be grateful for that. And in the end, it wound up being one of the best things that did ever happen to me. Trials happen to everyone. It's what we do with the trials that make all the big difference. And in this particular case, understanding what normal looked like changed everything for me. My challenge to you is when you have really hard, challenging things happen to you, ask yourself the question, how can this be the best thing that ever happened to me? How can I learn and grow from this? How can I help others because of what I've been through? It'll make all the difference.